Welcome to Corporate Warrior, the podcast that brings you the best advice on how to improve your health, optimize performance, and maximize productivity. With your host, Lawrence Neal.
This episode is brought to you by hituni.com. If you haven't been a long-time listener and had the upsides of high-intensity training drilled into your brain, HIT has dramatically reduced my exercise volume to sub 30 minutes per week, while helping me build more muscle and reduce my body fat to 10%, which in turn has enabled me to do more with my time, like play sports that I love, build businesses, and play more Call of Duty. Who wouldn't want that? So what has this got to do with Hit Uni? HitUni.com are providers of amazing online courses that teach you all about high-intensity training. There's a course for newbies that will show you how to optimize your workouts to build more muscle, burn more fat, and improve overall health. And the bulk of the courses are designed to qualify you to become a high-intensity training personal trainer and equip you with all the knowledge and business skills you need to build a successful fitness business. Hit Uni comes highly recommended by Body by Science author Dr. Doug McGuff, Discover Strength CEO Luke Carlson, Drew Bay, and Medix Precision Fitness owner Blair Wilson. It was founded by author and one of the UK's leading personal trainers, Simon Shawcross, who's been training people for 15 years and has supervised over 15,000 workouts. With help from contributors like Jimmy Moore, Dr. James Steele, and Edward Harrison, and inspiration from Arthur Jones, Dr. Ellington Darden, Ken Hutchins, Mike Mensa, Hit Uni is a goldmine for learning everything to do with high-intensity training. The courses are delivered online through the website, where you can learn via a variety of multimedia materials at your own pace. There's an online support and discussion forum where you can share ideas and ask for help. I personally used Hit Uni to build my own stunning physique, just kidding, but I have purchased a course to improve my understanding of HIT and improve my own results. The content is amazing, the courses are really easy to follow, and each section is organized into these bite-sized chunks that give you a real sense of achievement as you tick off each one. To get your exclusive Corporate Warrior 10% discount on any course you purchase, simply head on over to hituni.com, that's hituni.com, and enter the coupon code CW10. So again, head on over to hituni.com, choose your course, and enter the coupon code CW10. Thank you for your support. Howdy, this is Lawrence Neal, and welcome to another episode of Corporate Warrior, where I interview the experts on how to optimize productivity in fitness, business, and lifestyle to tease out the workout protocols, the diets, the supplement rituals, morning routines, and philosophies that you can steal and apply in your own life. Guests include New York Times best-selling authors, productivity pioneers, emergency room physicians, veteran high-intensity training personal trainers, extreme endurance racers, and many more. Today's guest is none other than Dr. Richard Winett. So over time, I get many requests from listeners and even guests on who I should interview next. And these all go into my trusty spreadsheet, which I review often to figure out who to invite on the show. Richard was one of the names that was repeated over and over again, so much so that I'd put 3 asterisks next to his name. And many of you guys were just keen to show your thanks for all that you've learned from him. And so after some back and forth and getting our schedules to fit, we finally made it happen. Richard was one of the first graduates from the clinical science program at the State University of New York at Stony Brook, a program that for the last 45 years has been one of the top worldwide leaders for developing psychologists in research careers. He's published over 260 peer-reviewed articles and has been the principal investigator of 17 research grants with research support of about $25 million funded by the National Institutes of Health, the National Science Foundation, and other agencies. Dr. Winett's research focuses on health behavior, particularly the intersection of health psychology, behavioral medicine, and public health, and the development of primary and secondary prevention programs linked to nutrition, physical activity, and exercise. Dr. Winett also has published studies in exercise science, specifically focused on resistance training and interval training, and privately has published via Ageless Athletes since 1991. In this interview, Rich and I talk about his journey through exercise, and we talk about how his own approach to exercise has changed over the years. And we explore Rich's diet plan, his thoughts on measuring calorie consumption, and his current views on eating fat and much, much more. Please pardon the audio quality during this interview. It was my fault that I didn't forewarn Richard to buy a mic. So he was talking into his laptop, which does make for not fantastic audio quality all the way through this one. I've tried to essentially make the quality as best as I can. But rest assured, we'll also be doing a part 2 where we'll hopefully explore more in terms of the psychological side of training, and the audio will be better quality this time around. All of the show notes and links will be on the usual place on corpwarrior.com, at corpwarrior.com. And without further delay, please enjoy this interview with Dr. Richard Winett. Richard, you actually were requested by a lot of the listeners to come onto Corporate Warrior. So I'm very grateful that you're coming on the show, especially after we've been sort of back and forth trying to get something arranged, and obviously I let you down, which I'm sorry for.
No problem.
But I just wanted to really kick off with your background, just so the listeners have an understanding of who you are, where you've come from, that kind of thing. So could you just kick off by telling the story of how you became interested in exercise, and then further to that, how your exercise preferences evolved over the years?
Well, a couple of things I think or several things are very relevant. One is I actually started when I was 13, which is not terribly surprising. I was small. I mean, I still remain small in height, and fairly timid. And I really needed something, and this is now, many, many years ago. And one of the things that I really think about, and particularly maybe as you get older, you sort of think of pivotal things in your life. So I was about to be 13. I was kind of a short roly-poly. And my mom asked me, what did I want for my birthday? And I told her I wanted a weight set, which at the time, seemed, crazy. And this is, a long, long time ago. But I think my mom really understood that I sort of needed something. And much to my surprise, she said, sure. So either at my birthday or shortly before, we went to a department store, because that's where you bought stuff. And I got what I remember, a 100-pound set, a bar, plates, some dumbbell with a bar. And literally we took it into like the laundry room in our house, and came, of course, with an instruction book, tried some things. I remember running upstairs telling my mom I actually pressed 35 pounds, which I thought was pretty amazing. And, it kind of went from there. So I've been doing this for literally decades, and it's something that I've always liked to do, got pretty good at it, and something I just really, continued. My training has evolved a bit, particularly as I've gotten older. I've also been very fortunate in my career at Virginia Tech, which goes back, again, decades, to work with some great people here, know some people at other places, and actually do some research both on the behavioral side of resistance training, like how do you actually get people to do this and stick with it. And that's been very, very interesting. So I have some different perspectives from doing this.
Okay. So, no, that is really interesting. So, as you said, you started off, lifting weights and getting PRs at a young age.
Sure.
How did you start off exercising? So, what kind of protocols were you doing when you started, and how has that changed over time to what you do now?
Like a lot of people starting out, particularly years ago, it was the most basic, kind of approach, maybe 8 or 9, 10 basic exercises, 1 or 2 sets, which frankly, as we come full circle, that probably is all anyone actually does need, which is kind of interesting since that was so many years ago. And that evolved to a couple of things, which again, I think are totally wrong directions, but the usual things that particularly I think men do. So towards my late teens, one of the things that people did was, quote, bulk up. So I actually weighed about 45 pounds more than I do now. It was really gigantic. And with the idea, which is, again, actually not true, that you could get really huge and then you would slowly lose the weight and all the muscle, which of course is not true. So I did that, and again, had to lose weight. It was just kind of ridiculous. Also, pretty
Richard,
much.
if I could just interject there. So you, I just want to make sure I answered that correctly. So you gained a lot of weight. You gained 40, 45 pounds, and you were trying to then lean down. Is that what you're describing?
Yes, but that actually is not a very good strategy, because basically, as we could talk about later, we all kind of have a limit, although this is not the most marketable thing to say, frankly, to how much lean body mass we can gain. I mean, any one of us could stuff ourselves with food and gain a lot of weight, which is really not the idea. So we could talk a little bit more about that really in a couple of minutes, which I think people will find interesting. But along the way, in my late teens and 20s, I also tried, as a lot of people do, very, very high volume training, 15, 20 sets per muscle group, which also is, as we look back on it, not a very good thing to do. And then from my mid to late 20s, 30s, I was always, quote, a little bit bulky. And what I started to do was continue with a very basic resistance training protocol, usually 3 times a week, whole body, maybe 12 to 15 exercises, most often 1 set each, but also started to run a lot, and eventually was running 40 miles a week. And because I keep very good records, I guess you could say a little bit obsessive, what's been interesting is to look back on that, and running, or frankly any endurance thing for me, is not a very good match. So when I look back at what should have been some very good training years, late 20s to middle to late 30s, basically that combination, I managed to get slower, believe it or not, even at least 1 day a week running intervals. And in addition, didn't seem to gain any strength, which was also kind of unbelievable. And was still not as heavy as I used to be, but always had sort of a bulky appearance, which I thought was sort of my natural state, you might say.
Sorry to interrupt, Richard. Was the running? Were you overtraining, and was that like cannibalizing muscle tissue or preventing you from getting any more lean muscle or strength gains? Is that was that the reason?
Yeah, I think all of the above. It was just too much, even being younger at the time. And I was very fortunate, and I certainly give this personal name a lot of credit. Around that time, Clarence Bass, who I'm sure people are familiar with, he started to have a number of articles in Ironman magazine, which were very good. I got some of his books, and over the course of into my early 40s to mid 40s, I actually found it extremely easy, frankly, about the easiest thing I ever did, was to get extremely lean. And there was really no change in exercise. I stopped running. I used cardiovascular machines that I had. I did interval training. That was maybe a little bit overdone. And started to train sort of a better way for me, which is kind of a forerunner to some of the stuff I do. So basically I found getting very lean extremely easy. And much to my surprise, my quote natural state was not to be bulky, but rather being lean. And getting lean was accomplished not by changing exercise, although as I said, I stopped running, which was the best thing I ever did, but literally just by reducing calories a bit and being very consistent with what I ate. And over a fairly short period of time, I got very lean. So that kind of continued, and kind of the way I started to eat then literally has continued for about 25 years. And the training is a little bit different And again, some of the stuff I sort of wish that I did differently in some of those prime years, 40s and 50s, for example. So, are we still on together?
Yeah. I'm listening intently.
Okay. What I used to do, I think my approach really was kind of a quasi-powerlifting approach. And I was quite good at squatting and deadlifting and using fairly heavy weights, with one huge caveat that people really should consider. And what I'm going to tell you is not an exaggeration. So I think from Arthur Jones' influence, which was seminal for me, besides Training to Failure, etc., one of the things I really got from that, which he emphasized, was with the squat and deadlift doing higher reps. So being actually quite strong in those, doing higher repetitions, I think literally saved me from, and I'm not exaggerating, catastrophic injuries. Because one of my issues, which may be true of other people, my neuromuscular ability, for example, the ability to do something heavy in a squat or deadlift or chins with weight, that sort of thing, was far more than my musculoskeletal system could take. And if you are doing that over and over again, you're going to get really hurt. So one of the things that protected me was, again, at least in some movements, doing higher repetitions, still with appreciable weight, particularly again considering my size. So where this evolved in my late 50s, early 60s, really based on work from my friend Ralph Carpinelli and Stuart Phillips at McMaster University, which again I think is in many ways has enabled me to continue to train effectively into years that you would not expect that, is realizing that the major stimulus from resistance training is not how much weight you're using, but really the degree of effort. So you could use a moderate resistance. I don't use, quote, light resistance. Mm-hmm. Use very, very good form, control your repetitions, and it's extremely effective. And you don't, therefore, have, at least in my case, musculoskeletal issues, which at this point, I think, literally I would use the word purposely, could be, crippling. So if you really get hurt, knees, back, etc., as you get older, you're done, literally. And if you're younger and get hurt like that, some of those injuries will just, carry on with you throughout your life. So I think a more, quote, effort-based approach, which really is not focused on how much possible weight you could use, but rather your form, degree of effort, and attempt to use somewhat higher repetitions, longer time on intention. And the result of that is it's pretty easy to recover from workouts, where I think with heavy weights, low reps, etc., it's extremely hard to recover. At least that's been my experience.
You mentioned Clarence Bass, who's obviously a big someone who is a lot of my listeners are very fond of. And also you've mentioned Arthur Jones there, but what other influences have you had in exercise and I suppose health and fitness and nutrition in general through the years? And who would you consider your mentors now, if you have any in that space?
Well, I think really Clarence was very helpful in a number of ways, and not just in the training part, but I think something that, again, really goes beyond that. So using him, I wouldn't say as a mentor, but following some of the things he did and seeing how I literally could transform myself from a bulky kind of guy to someone extremely lean. And I think it's something for other people to think about beyond exercise. And it really gave me a lot of confidence that I could do something like that career-wise, not in terms of training other people, but that, well, my career to that point, late 30s, 40s, have been quite successful. I could even be more successful. So I think one of the things you can get from exercise and seeing how well you could do that, and all the kind of stick-to-itiveness that takes and planning, etc., that you could apply the very same things to other aspects of your life, and find that you could maybe go further than you really thought you could before.
Let's just want to take a shift into diet quickly. After reading your article you sent me, the Lifetime Bodybuilding and Masters Athletes Master Trainer article PDF, definitely created a lot of questions for me. So, would you be able to just give a day's worth of eating for you currently? So, what your current diet looks like on a day, like an average day?
Well, the days are actually pretty similar, so there's real consistency in eating, which I think makes things a lot simpler. And the starting point, which I think is really critical, is to say this is a good nutritional pattern. So it's not bizarre. It's similar, although I would not claim it's the same as kind of a Mediterranean kind of diet, but obviously living in North America, it's a bit different. So I have for years. One is, even though I'm small, I've always required a lot of eating, a lot of food. So for me, some days it's a question of, how can I actually eat enough to maintain my weight? So I generally eat 5 to 6 smaller meals a day. That's been a pattern that, again, I followed for many, many years. It's worked. I don't like to eat a lot at one time. I emphasize a lot of protein. I do consume about 2 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight, which, again, if you're small but require a lot of calories, it's not all that difficult. And in every meal, there's about at least 30 grams of quality protein. I eat a lot of dairy. I also have at least fish once or twice a day. I do eat a lot of fruits and vegetables, at least 8 to 10 servings a day. I eat some whole grains. So if you can imagine, 5 or 6 meals like that in a day, that's really what's worked very well for me. And it's not so crazy, because I find, for example, when I travel, I could do pretty much the same thing. I've noticed also in planes. I mean, the airline food is, unless you're in first class, is almost unedible. So I always have food with me, whether they're protein bars, etc., and fruit. And I've noticed over recent years that a lot of other people are doing it. So it's really a pattern that has worked. And again, it doesn't take a lot of planning. If there's a fair amount of consistency, day by day. When I'm at my office at work, at my refrigerator, bring stuff, etc. So again, not all that complicated.
So you still aim for 2,850 to 3,000 calories per day. Is that correct? Around that?
If I'm quote more active, like we were walking around the cities in Scandinavia, it's around 3,000, 3,200, something, plus or minus. If I'm more sedentary, but still train that day, it may be around 2,700. And obviously these are not exact, but fairly good estimates. And I don't think any of that is difficult. You could familiarize yourself with the calorie content of food and just look at something and you know what it is. Except if you're in restaurants where you have no idea what the sauces are, etc. That's sort of a whole other story.
Yeah. Have you ever experimented with, consuming, say, 2,000 calories a day? And have you noticed a dramatic decrease in lean mass as a result?
I can't eat that way. I mean, literally, I'm hungry every 3 or 4 hours. And the idea, I just can't do that. So in my, if you ask, well, how did you go from being, bulky to very lean in my mid-late 40s or mid-50s. What worked very well then, which I realize is not all that typical, I simply from kind of a baseline weight maintenance level, just reduced my calories each day about 250 and stuck to that. It was extremely systematic and worked very well.
Right. Okay. One of the things you mentioned in the article was that you didn't, or perhaps you still don't, eat much in the way of fat, and especially saturated fat. Have your thoughts about that changed at all since, obviously fat's become a lot more popular now, and the hypotheses from like Ansel Keys and I think it was the 50s and 60s have been kind of debunked. And personally, I do eat quite a lot of fat in my diet, and I found, I'm able to still have very good body composition and feel, I guess, fairly healthy and not have much in the way of any illness or anything like that. So I just wondered if that's what your position is on fat these days.
Yeah, there's. It's interesting you mentioned, those early studies by Ansel Keys and how they were flawed. So, for example, in the morning, and heaven forbid, 10 years ago, we should have said this. So the morning starts off with an example would be 4 eggs, 2 pieces of fruit, and a piece of whole wheat toasted bread. And then I only rarely eat low fat dairy, so most of it is full fat cheese, etc. And also eat a lot of nuts, a lot of almonds, walnuts, etc. So this is not a low fat diet, and if anything, again, it's more similar to Mediterranean diet, which is not low fat either.
Yeah, sure, okay. This is a bit of a strange question, but I'm curious to hear your thoughts. I've been, sometimes I'll have an omelette in the morning. At the moment, I'm eating, a fair amount, probably a similar number of calories to as yourself, actually. Sure. I've historically always eaten probably slightly less, and that's probably one reason why, potentially why I've plateaued in terms of gaining lean mass. And I was doing some reading, and I kind of read around, cooking certain fats at different temperatures can damage the fats and make them obviously less beneficial for you. So, Dave Asprey, who's the guy behind the Bulletproof Diet and all of that, and the Bulletproof Coffee, claims that if you're going to cook eggs, then probably one of the best ways to cook eggs is to poach them. Because when you make an omelette, you end up heating the egg so high that, a lot of the goodness in the egg is removed. Do you have any thoughts around that? Do you think about how you cook your food? And that it sounds like a very paranoid approach to food, but I'd just be interested to hear what you think about that kind of stuff.
I really don't know about that, and to be honest, not exactly a high cuisine person. So some of it is convenience, habit, easy to do. So an example, which again some people may find almost horrendous, but actually it's I don't have a lot of time in the morning. So what I do, I have a bowl. I put in some olive oil. And I put, 4 eggs in it, mix it up, put some seasoning in it, typically pepper or maybe Tabasco sauce, and put it in the microwave. So there's no mess, and it's simple. I have no idea if microwaving them is, good, bad, or indifferent, but it's very simple, and it works, and it's early in the morning, and I really don't want to take the time for, anything that in fact is going to take a long time, requires a lot of, cleanup.
Good answer. Okay. So a couple of questions from listeners, which I'm going to probably read and then perhaps restate to make them, I guess, questions and make them a little clearer. So Stuart Gilbert, who's a listener, has submitted quite a few here. So he says he brings up Clarence Bass. He says like Clarence Bass, Richard used to be heavily into intervals, as you reported on the effectiveness and time efficacy Let me just read this. Okay, so essentially what he's asking is, have you, because you still do intervals now. I know you used to do a lot of volume in terms of steady state activity, but do you still incorporate interval training into your, I guess, fitness regimen today as well?
How about this for being a true academic? Yes and no. And let me explain, because I think, it fits into the whole notion of sustainable training. So, for example, things like sprint intervals and very hard intervals that are short, I'm very good at that. It's sort of modesty aside, but that's sort of my type. I've always been good at that. And the question is, what can you do and actually recover from? And what's the difference from maybe a protocol that may or may not be, the absolute best, and something that it's supposed to be the best? So an example is if I do sprint intervals on, let's say, a stationary bike, an upright, I can get to some, very impressive levels. The problem is that it makes me really sore, and not just muscular soreness, but knees and hips. So therefore, I don't do that, or we'll do it only rarely. And one of the things to look at is, and if you keep records of your training, it's fairly apparent. In this case, with the cardiovascular part, what's sort of the level of intensity that gets me past the quote anaerobic threshold, but is very easy to recover from. So the fitness part, which is frankly not my main focus, and I do pretty good at that. And, what may be absolutely optimal. So what I do a lot of, which is actually very, very simple, it's typically after a lower body training, it just fits in stationary bike, a graded warm-up. I get to about 70% of my heart rate, maximum heart rate. And then rather than a steady state approach, I do 5 minutes, where the first 2 minutes I get to about 75%, the next 2 minutes 80 to 85%. And then I do a last minute, which has 2 30-second segments, and I get to maybe 85 plus on that, and that's it. Occasionally I go higher. But when I go higher, what I really notice the next day, my legs are kind of sore. So I tend, to think, well, why am I doing that? What's the purpose if my main activity is resistance training? I'm not trying to set a record, doing cardiovascular stuff. And if you look at the levels that I'm reaching on the stationary bike for my age and gender, you have, a good level of fitness. I'm not trying to get to the absolute top on that. So it's actually much, much simpler. And again, the point is, if you're doing a workout and the next day or two you feel, crummy, you have to ask yourself, what's the point of doing this? I mean, it just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. Are there any particular modes of exercise, as another one for Stuart, resistance or cardio, that you don't recommend for older trainees?
I think, again, obviously some people have issues with range of motion, which, again, could be, fairly idiosyncratic. I think what really works, and certainly based on the studies we've done, is something that, again, is much more effort-based. And again, doing fairly controlled repetitions. I'm not talking about super slow, but maybe 3 up, 3 down, which is not all that slow, but different from how you see most people train. And literally not extending a range of motion you cannot do. Again, using a fairly lower volume approach, being sure that you actually recovered from workout to workout. And as common sense as this sounds, which I think it is, and there's nothing, rocket science about it. When you look at and go to different gyms around the U.S., Europe, Sicily a couple of years ago, and you look at how older people are training, And again, I realize these are stereotypes, and forgive me for that. Either people are doing something, again, older people, a lot of sets, somehow 3 is a magic number, but virtually no effort. It's like, what's the point of this? Or, again, a stereotype that I see with older men, they're using a great deal of resistance, but they have so reduced the range of motion that, without exaggerating, they are doing, quote, repetitions that are about 2 inches. Again, it's kind of a stereotype, but I've seen this with older men, that they use a lot of resistance, let's say, for a chest press on a machine or leg extension or whatever. And what they're doing is the range of motion is a couple of inches. So it's a form of self-delusion. And again, for most people would be, really play havoc with your, joints and ligaments. So again, I think it's not rocket science, doing something quite sensible, controlled repetitions, effort-based. People could do most any kind of movement.
So a question I had actually following reading the article you sent me. So one of the things you talk about is you tend to exercise one set to with a high degree of effort for what you would consider, I guess, is it 60 to 120 seconds time under load or time under tension. A lot of other people in the high intensity training space advocate training to failure and then inroading, so contracting against the resistance for 5 to 10 seconds to fatigue the musculature even further, so then I suppose elicit a greater response. It doesn't seem like you advocate that. Why is that, and what are your thoughts about inroading in general?
One is, I think there's fairly limited evidence for that. And I think there's several reasons, not to do that. In no special order, they include, one, it's actually hard to be systematic with that. So if you're doing like rest pause, if you take a little bit more or less time, workout to workout, you don't have any consistency. I would get back to the midpoint. There's not much data to say it does much of anything. 3, so the second point about consistency and reproducibility. Another thing really to think about, and there's not a lot of evidence for this, if you do something that has potential to be, I use the word advisedly, kind of destructive, then a lot of the processes involved in consuming food and rest really goes to repair the damage. And what you've done is really not contributed to, quote, growth, which obviously at a long, training career is not going to be, very much. But I think that it just, to me, is such a crazy kind of concept that with training, and again, we'd emphasize the word training, this is not something where you actually, kill yourself. And I really thought about this knowing that, we'd be talking today. So I think when you do a workout and any exercise within that protocol for the day, one is ask yourself, is it reproducible? I mean, can I do this again, in the next workout? If you can't, you say, what's the point of this? 2 is, can I actually recover from this? Which again is part of the first idea. And another really, critical thing, which is hardly ever talked about in these kind of discussions, is to actually enjoy doing this. So if training becomes a drudgery that has become so hard and so draining, this thing is absolutely crazy. The fourth thing is that most of us are not, professionals. And if we work out in the morning, for example, we need to go to work, and you can't be in, for example, a meeting, and you're so, blasted from a workout, you can't even pay attention. So to me, absolutely none of this stuff, makes any sense, particularly for training or for the long term, which presumably is something you like to do, get something out of, and actually look, forward to. So what's an example here which would be almost heretical, in some high-intensity training? So take something like the squat, which I still do after all these years. Obviously, at this point with less weight than I used to, but I would say actually at this point with better form. So I always do that with high repetitions, which I think is about the only reason I could still do that. And again, it's usually 3 up, 3 down, or something close to that. And the question is, do you want to go to the absolute last rep? And even though I'm in a rack, risk one, not being able to get up from the last rep, even though it's safe within a rack. And two, turn it into absolutely drudgery. So again, what's heretical to say is with the squat or something like that, I don't do deadlifting anymore, but a good morning exercise, I often will stop kind of a rep before the absolute last rep, and it makes the whole thing doable. I could literally, after a set of high repetition squats, a minute later do a very good set of morning exercise. So I think the thing to think about is this is training. It's not supposed to be near-death experiences.
It's interesting because this sounds like it almost goes against a lot of what some of the guys in the high intensity training space would say about how you need to, it's the last rep, it's the last part of the set that is the most important, that's going to elicit the greatest response, and everything you do leading up to that is almost pointless. I mean, it's not that's their point of view. So you feel like that's not your experience. There's not enough data to support that is true.
Well, and every other exercise, but the squat, for example, I think what's important is to find what is the last repetition. And the last repetition is the one I could do in the identical form from the one before, in the series of the ones before. So I agree, the stimulus seems to be effort. But if you start breaking down your form, either by taking breaks and rest pause, or you don't do complete range of motion, or you're getting assistance, force reps, etc. This is, to me, as a long-time trainee, this to me is kind of crazy. You've already delivered the stimulus, and it's time to move on, to something else. And if your workout in that style literally is reduced to 5 or 6 exercises, one set each every week to 10 days, this is not training. This is it sounds more like torture.
Okay. Good stuff. Okay, so let me just Stuart's got some more questions I want to ask you here. Okay, so yeah, you train fairly regularly, Richard. You train four times a week, is it at minimum at the moment, roughly around that?
It averages and has averaged over the last 4 or 5 years around 5 times a week.
Right, okay. And one of the things you mentioned in the article was that you've personally found that your recovery ability has not decreased with age. Is that correct?
I would say that's true. There's a limit. So there are some weeks, for example, for a number of reasons, often in hindsight, not the best reasons. I'll train 6 days a week and actually feel pretty good. It's a lower upper body split, but hard to do. And then quite predictably, the next week I really feel tired and can't put forth the effort. But I very, very consistently do the 5 days per week, and that's fairly easy for me.
Okay. Do you recommend that type of frequency for older trainees, or do you think that most people thrive on less, and perhaps that's just a genetic advantage? Or what are your thoughts around that?
I think that as far as frequency, it really is a matter of recovery, and that varies between people. So you could be good in recovery, but maybe not that strong. Vice versa, you could be very strong, but not that terrific in recovery, etc. So it's simply an individual characteristic, and the thing that makes sense for most people who are starting, frankly, is to do a whole body routine, very simple twice a week, and kind of go from there. Which maybe that's what you always do, because through literally history, that's been what's been very effective for most people.
You mentioned how fond you are of daily walks, and occasionally some more intense walks, so uphill walking and that kind of thing. Do you still do that on a regular basis? Or what benefits do you derive from doing that regularly? Have you found?
Well, one is it's called my off day routine if I'm not training. And because we live in an area that's very hilly, it's fairly easy to do. I really don't have to go anywhere. Literally walk out my front door. And there's a limit to that, because if it's off day and you're walking up some fairly long steep hills, it could be morphed into a workout that's harder than some of the stuff I'm doing in the gym for cardiovascular training. So there's a limit to that. The other thing, and I say this kind of sadly, my companion for the last 10 years has been our dog, Jeter, who's named after our favorite baseball player, Derek Jeter. And Jeter is now getting older. So some of these longer walks, particularly when it's warm, have slowed down to accommodate him, where in the past he used to be, leading the pack, so to speak. But I think the walks are good for sort of thinking about things and planning things, etc. And like a lot of people, most of my work is, or all my work is done inside, so it's a chance actually to be outside. We live in a place, again, that is really, really nice. It's easy to walk places. The climate's really good. We have, truly 4 seasons, but they're not horrific. They're not terribly hot, like where my daughter's family lives in Arizona, where it's incredibly hot. The winters could be cold, but they're fairly short, etc. So I've been very fortunate with that.
That sounds really nice. So a question from William Go, which is a bit of a change from what we just spoke about, which is a question about body composition. But he asks, what body fat percentage do you think is healthy and manageable for, I guess, men and women based on yours and your client's experience, Richard?
It's a good question, and undoubtedly it's not the body fat level of a bodybuilder. And as one of my friends who is actually known in the field, I don't want to name him, he died actually years ago from a number of episodes of cancer. And remember a couple of years before he died, we were talking about this, and he said, as you get older, it's not that great to be that extremely low body fat, because you have absolutely no reserves if anything happens. Interesting thing to think about. So probably in the range of maybe 10 to 15%. And again, what may be far more important than the specific percent is actually something much simpler, which is easy to track with no high-tech equipment, which is waist circumference. And if your waist circumference is going up, which is, again, you can take a measure every week, or you could be more obsessive like me every day in the early morning and do it consistently, you know which way your body's going. And if your waist is getting a little bigger, it usually is apparent you're gaining body fat. If it's going down a little bit, you're probably losing a little bit of body fat. So this is not very high-tech stuff. And if you look at waist circumference as an indicant of visceral fat, which is associated with risk for diabetes and some cancers, and that becomes very important. But you don't have to get extremely lean to be healthy. In fact, we could probably say that being extremely lean as you get older is probably not a great idea.
That's a really interesting perspective, and I like that, a simple way to check, I guess, where you're at in terms of body fat. So is there, in your opinion, an ideal waist circumference for man and woman? I'm assuming they'd probably be quite different.
I think what really has been found, and again, we're talking about, quote, central obesity, which has become really one, rather, if you pardon the bad pun, prominent. And I think for men, what's considered central obesity is a waist circumference over 42 inches. I forgot what that comes out to in centimeters, maybe 104, 105. For women, it's something like 37 inches, which is, I think, maybe 88 centimeters. And those are sort of above that, your risk levels. And really what's been found, rather than BMI, it's really central obesity, which is really the major risk factor. Which is not to say that, your BMI could be sky high, but it's something really to think about. So I don't think, I could say what's the ideal waist measure. As long as you're kind of below those figures, you're probably not at risk.
I guess thing is, though, you've got some guys and girls who are what some people call skinny fat.
Right.
So they look on the outside, they don't have much in the way of subcutaneous fat, but they have perhaps a lot of visceral fat relative to their size, and their waist would remain relatively small regardless. So I'm assuming for those people, this type of way of measuring is not that ideal.
No, I agree with you, and I think really what's not done, and it's really a shame, even if you're using a simple kind of way to measure, body fat, using a scale, and obviously there's error due to hydration, etc. But at least in the U.S. and I'm guessing in the UK, when you go to your primary care physician, not only do they not do like a waist circumference, they don't have you even stand on an impedance scale. So I think, medicine and public health is really well beyond, what the data is telling us about, body composition and its importance.
Yeah, I mean, I personally, and, friends and co-workers of mine think I'm a bit mad, but I get a bod pod done every probably 3 or 4 months, because it's a much more accurate way of measuring body fat and lean body mass, and I find it very motivational because I like to see, I like to experiment, so I like to eat a certain diet, train a certain way for so much time, and see how my body responds to that. But also it's a great way to get a baseline. I mean, I've taken friends with me, a specific friend of mine who, you look at him and you think, oh, he's a slim guy, he probably looks fairly healthy, and he was over 30% body fat, and he was, Yeah, and he was obviously at risk of a lot of diseases, especially as he gets older, and he's only in his, sort of late 20s, but it triggered him. It kind of sort of kicked him into action to really do something about it. And I think a lot of people kind of need that wake up call, and having a device like a bod pod to give you pretty good data on your body is critical for some of this sort of stuff. So another guest actually was on my podcast, and a friend of mine, James Steele, who I think you might be familiar with, probably familiar with some of his work. He asked, what are your suggestions for maximizing, I think he knows the answer to this, but he's interested, he wants you to obviously say on the podcast, what are your suggestions for maximizing initiation and adherence to resistance training for the general public?
We've actually, and I think James knows this because I think I sent him some of the stuff from our quote resist diabetes study. So we've actually, with funding from the National Institutes of Health, did a long-term trial with men and women 50 to 69, overweight to obese, central obesity, previously inactive. And the only intervention was quote, resistance training, twice a week, the most simple protocol, 12 exercises, 1 set each. A couple of keys are, one, that the first part was a 3-month supervised phase with very, very good trainers. So people really learned how to do this in a very effective way with trainers who were there, not to chit-chat, but following our protocol. And James will appreciate this social cognitive theory from psychology. It's all about mastery experiences, showing a person what to do, having them do it, getting feedback, etc. And then we had a long maintenance phase where, again, people are using our site in this particular project, keeping track of their workouts, getting very specific feedback on how they're doing, working on problems they may have with their training. Life, as you know, interferes with training sometime. And we got actually very good adherence rates, and also got a very good rate of what's called normal glycemic. In other words, people who are pre-diabetic no longer being pre-diabetic. So I don't think it's that straightforward. I think just a few training sessions is not it. I think the self-regulation piece is very, very, critical. I do notice that we are actually running out of time, and what I'd be, very happy to do is part 2 at some point soon.
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to suggest the same thing actually. So I'll reach out to you and we'll get some dates in the diary, and I'll be a little bit better organised than this time. So I shall. No, I just want to say I really appreciate your time, Richard. But I shall let you shoot off. For everyone listening, please head over to corpwarrior.com. That's CORP warrior.com for all of to listen to this episode and for all of the show notes. And there'll be links and resources there. So any parting words, Richard, or do you want to stop now and we'll get a part 2 arranged soon?
Just let me say I really appreciate your interest and greatly look forward to part 2.
Hey, you're welcome. I will talk to you soon, Richard. All the best.
Okay, take care.
Cheers. Take care. Bye.
Bye-bye.
This episode is brought to you by hituni.com. If you haven't been a long-time listener and had the upsides of high-intensity training drilled into your brain, HIT has dramatically reduced my exercise volume to sub 30 minutes per week, while helping me build more muscle and reduce my body fat to 10%, which in turn has enabled me to do more with my time, like play sports that I love, build businesses, and play more Call of Duty. Who wouldn't want that? So what has this got to do with HIT Uni? HitUni.com are providers of amazing online courses that teach you all about high-intensity training. There's a course for newbies that will show you how to optimize your workouts to build more muscle, burn more fat, and improve overall health. And the bulk of the courses are designed to qualify you to become a high-intensity training personal trainer and equip you with all the knowledge and business skills you need to build a successful fitness business. HIT Uni comes highly recommended by Body by Science author Dr. Doug McGuff, Discover Strength CEO Luke Carlson, Drew Bay, and Medex Precision Fitness owner Blair Wilson. It was founded by author and one of the UK's leading personal trainers, Simon Shawcross, who's been training people for 15 years and has supervised over 15,000 workouts. With help from contributors like Jimmy Moore, Dr. James Steele, and Edward Harrison, and inspiration from Arthur Jones, Dr. Ellington Darden, Ken Hutchins, Mike Mensa, HIT Uni is a goldmine for learning everything to do with high-intensity training. The courses are delivered online through the website, where you can learn via a variety of multimedia materials at your own pace. There's an online support and discussion forum where you can share ideas and ask for help. I personally used HIT Uni to build my own stunning physique, just kidding, but I have purchased a course to improve my understanding of HIT and improve my own results. The content is amazing, the courses are really easy to follow, and each section is organized into these bite-sized chunks that give you a real sense of achievement as you tick off each one. To get your exclusive Corporate Warrior 10% discount on any course you purchase, simply head on over to hituni.com, that's hituni.com, and enter the coupon code CW10. So again, head on over to hituni.com, choose your course, and enter the coupon code CW10. Thank you for your support.